I want to thank all of you for coming out again on such an icky day. And I'm sure we'll have stragglers coming in later because we always do. But I want to start out by thanking a few people because I forgot to do it at the end last week, and I got home and I was just so upset with myself that I didn't remember. But I really need to thank Jean and Phil, who've helped me put this all together, and Winnie, who booked the room. It was actually Phil's idea for me to do this here. And Jean has taken control of or not taken control, but is taking care of the chai table and the snacks, which is a huge weight off my shoulders so that I don't have to do that. But anyway, thank you. I'm glad you all are here. Two things. You ready? We have this box of goodies, and you're not supposed to be able to see what's in them. You're going to have to reach in them and pull something out. And let me just give this to you because I don't want it to get broken. I also have some readings here. I think there are 7 of them. Can I just pass them around, and whoever wants to do a reading will take one? We'll start them here. They're not too long. Today we're going to talk about what Meher Baba had to say about evolution, which turned out to be quite a bit more than I had thought to begin with. But like so many other topics, it's kind of scattered throughout a number of different sources that have to kind of be pieced together. And we're going to look at the corresponding scientific explanations for the process of evolution. The 4 main primary sources for Baba's word include creation. You can have another one because they're going to be extras. Creation and its causes, in which he's speaking to the Prem Ashram boys. Lord Meher, which is speaking to us, the reader. God Speaks, in which Baba is speaking directly to the readers. In Lord Meher, actually, it's Baba speaking usually to the men for the quotes that I'm using today. And then the rest comes from early messages to the West, in which Baba describes the scenario for how it all happened for the film that he was wanted to make, that never got made. So those are the main sources. In God Speaks, Baba gave us what he called the divine theme, his definitive explanation for the process of evolution and involution as the soul or Atma. We need to go around until they're all taken. Yeah, they need to all be taken.
That's your
Please and thank you. And Baba gives us the divine theme, which is his definitive explanation for evolution and involution, and how we ever so slowly make our way back to our original existence in God. In Appendix 8 of Early Messages to the West, Ward observed, someone want to read that, please?
Though Meher Baba was the author and originator of the divine theme,
Take another one.
as a cosmological explanation for the origin and purpose. Oh,
You can't see. That's cheating.
would you like me to start again?
What?
Would you like me to start again?
Yes, please.
Though Meher Baba was the author and originator of the divine theme as a cosmological explanation for the origin and purpose of the universe, he clearly envisioned drawing into his film information from the science of the day, This scientific exposition and discourse comes as part of this effort to integrate science with spirituality.
So that's where we start today. But we need to bear in mind that what Baba told us is a different, what Baba gave us is a completely different explanation of evolution than what we get from the scientists. Well, it's not completely different, but it's very different in some places and really kind of esoteric. But there are a lot of synchronicities, and those are what we're going to look at this afternoon. He referred to Darwin as having speculated that he produced mere theories, yet the explanations given here in Baba's lectures, these lectures, are of things actually seen. And the editor's note at the bottom of the page reads, Baba seems to be referring here not to empirical, that is scientific explanations, but to the immediate inner sight that is gnosis, that is the evolutionary process that he has been describing is known directly through the knowledge of a seer, one who experiences the subtle world, hence the differences. What he's telling us is that the process that he's laid out for us originates in the subtle world, and by the time it makes its way into the gross world to manifest in the world that's observed and described by science, it becomes much more complex and dynamic and works a little bit differently. And we'll talk about that later a little bit more at the very end. This is why it's not possible to reconcile everything Baba said with everything that science tells us, but we will see how they do intertwine quite a bit. Before there was earth, before there was light, there was a true clash of titans, Pran and Akash. Do you all know who Pran and Akash are, what they are, what they stand for?
Energy and emptiness.
Exactly, exactly. And we are ready for the first reading.
Would you repeat that so people on there?
Pran and Akash are energy and emptiness. Thank you.
Space.
In the beginning, there was an ocean of dazzling light without any shore, or a deep, deep darkness which gradually vanishes into hollow emptiness. From this darkness, or dazzling light, comes a point of projection. A tiny point of light appears. From this point come Akash, full space, and Pran, primal energy. These two come together with a clash. From this whirling chaos, the subtle sphere comes into existence. Then the primal elements of fire, water, air, and earth, nebula, and millions of heavenly bodies, billions of huge, enormous, immense, hot, rotating bodies of mass spinning tremendously fast, millions of suns and planets. From the nebula came the four elements, though they were not produced simultaneously. First came heat, then crust, rocks, and lastly water.
And that's from Lord Mayhair.
Lord Mayhair, page 1610.
Susan,
Yeah?
next time someone reads, you're going to have to give them the microphone.
Okay. I was afraid of that. Scientists place the birth of our universe at anywhere between 8.4 and 26 billion years, which is a pretty huge gap. But most scientists think that it's more in the maybe 15 billion year range, kind of in between those two. And of course, they call it the Big Bang, which is kind of an apt name for what Baba describes as the lightning clash of Pran and Akash. Lord Mayhair tells us that beginning on 23rd May 1934, In the room at the back veranda of the mess quarters at Lower Mehrabad, he had begun dictating the theory of creation for the first time. Baba would dictate on the alphabet board, while Jalbai or Chanji would read. Ferrum Working Boxwala would take it down in shorthand and later type it out. Adi Sr., Babu Kali, and Minu Pohawala were present and listened. And Baba continued his explanation. It was reading number 2.
What is there in the universe? Billions and billions of nebulae. Every nebula contains millions of worlds, and ours is the Earth. What is there in the whole universe? It is gas in its 276 subtle states. Before gas turns into the first manifestation of the gross, it evolves through 276 subtle stages. None of the scientists knows about these 276 subtle forms of gas before its first manifestation in the gross. Subtle gas very gradually turns into gross form, such as hydrogen, oxygen, etc. In the nebulae, in all heavenly bodies, and in the planets, there is evolution. All of evolution begins from the nebulae, which are at the source of subtle energy, pran, and subtle space, akash. This means that even before the elements, not before heat, but before water, the electron evolved. Lord Mayher, page 1610.
Thank you. I'm sorry, my phone is going off. I forgot to have the alarm set to remind me to listen to Jamie's concerts, and I forgot to turn it off. Don't roll off. How embarrassing. Of all the cell phones that go off, it's the speakers. Yeah, I hope that can serve as a reminder for everybody to make sure their phones are off. Yes, Fred.
Just a curiosity. You said that he started developing the theory of evolution. Mm-hmm. And if Baba gave it to us, isn't it the truth about evolution? It is.
It's the truth from the subtle world. But there's another form of, you could call it truth in the gross world, but that's all illusion. But when it makes the transition into the gross world, other things happen. It's a lot more complicated. Maybe Maya is at work, I don't know. But you'll see as we go that there are, I don't want to call them discrepancies, but there are things that take place here in our world that are a little bit different from what Baba explained. And when we come back to that at the end, then it'll make a lot more sense, I think. Wow, that was a pretty tidy summation of the first 4 to 22 billion years of evolution of the universe in 3 paragraphs, while science writes books this thick and still can't exactly figure it out. One of the patterns that fascinates me one of the things that fascinates me in the gross world and about creation is the repetition of patterns. And the first one to appear was the spiral in the arms of the nebulae, and it continues to be a part of our evolutionary process. It's a very specific kind of spiral that was first identified by a man named, an Italian named Fibonacci, who is thought to have been the greatest mathematician during the medieval age. And it has a sequence. And you can see it here in how it looks when you lay it over top of over the arms of the nebula. You can definitely see how it works, and it's one of the most basic forms that we find in nature, and we find it everywhere. Plants, animals, inanimate things, even in human bodies. The proportions of our bodies are related to the Fibonacci sequence. We see it in architecture. This one blew my mind. I thought that was just really interesting to look at. And then this, of course, a fiddlehead, which is, I can't think of a more beautiful manifestation of the Fibonacci spiral than that. Baba went on to capture the next 4.5 billion years history of the formation of the planet with the following 3 paragraphs. Reading number 3.
In the beginning, our world was very, very hot. After slowly cooling down, what happened? All the gas was solidified. As the planet became cooler, a crust formed. With the gradual cooling, the Earth's crust became solid and the center remained hot. Rocks were formed from the crust. There are natural gaps in the crust because the formation of the rocks was not regular. What happened then was, when the gas became cool, it turned into liquid. And this liquid, water, seeped in between the rocks. Rocks were turned into mountains and the valleys, and the cool water filled them. This created the oceans and the seas, and evolution of form begins with the oceans. Lord Mayher, 1610. Seems like you got a lot in on that one page.
I know. I know. And it's so eloquently explained. You can visualize it. You know, you can see in the screen, and close your eyes and see in the screen in your own mind. You can see what that looks like. And this illustration shows the layers that he was speaking about. The numbers that Baba used to explain the age of the universe are truly mind-boggling. We cannot take them in. For example, he said, quote, "One cycle is 12,000 million years, or 12 followed, I believe, by 9 zeros, or 12,000 lakhs. The scientists do not know anything at all about cycles, but this hint will open their eyes. Evolution, which started from the nebula, will last until the completion of the cycle, when the Mahapralaya, the total dissolution of the universe, will take place." I need to use this side of it, don't I? I can tell the difference. This illustration gives us a sense of Baba's numbers and the time scale that we're talking about. And just to add one more level of magnitude to the scale of this process, Baba tells us in God Speaks, quote, "Just as there is evolution of consciousness and evolution of forms, so also is there the evolution of the worlds. Our world is evolving concurrently with other worlds in accordance with the progressive evolution of the entire cosmic creation." In his explanations of evolution, Baba defines 7 kingdoms, which are... Somebody going to name them for me?
Stone, metal.
Uh-huh.
Gas.
No, gas is not one of them. Gas comes before stone and metal. For some reason, he doesn't include it. He starts with stone and metal.
Vegetable.
Okay.
Insect.
But they're insects, worms. Insects are part of the worm group. And fish and birds and animals, which he really refers to mammals.
What about the reptiles?
The reptiles are part of the worm kingdom. The worm kingdom is really huge. It includes insects and reptiles and amphibians and something else that I always forget. But it's vast. And I guess it was because from an evolutionary standpoint, that part of the process took a really long time. It was really laying the groundwork for everything that was going to come after. But to keep us on our toes, Baba also sometimes combines stone and metal into one kingdom, so that humans were the seventh kingdom, which is not what he's done here. And Ward thinks it's because the number 7 was more important to him than, what the actual names were. It was whatever he talked about always added up to 7. And just to add one more layer of esoterica to incorporate into our understanding, during his talks with the men, Baba introduced the concepts of pinches and twists. Quote, pinches are twists of sanskaras, and they have 7 chief forms. Again, we've just gone through those: stone or metal, vegetable, worm, fish, bird, animal, and man. Every twist of the sanskaras gives the next form. So there are 7 twists for 7 forms. Kind of like 7 brides for 7 brothers. It keeps running through my head. And after every 7th stage, there is a twist. And all I could think when I read this was, it's no wonder the spiritual path is so hard. We're being pinched and twisted all the time. Think about it.
No, I'll leave that to you.
Yeah. Yeah, don't think about it. This is the geological time scale, and you can see how complicated it is. It's really hard to read. It reads from the bottom up. It just is very difficult to use. But it's what geologists have learned about the formation of the earth and the process of evolution from the very beginning up until the Cenozoic era, which is the one that we're living in right now. I found this one a lot more fun. This is for 8th graders. And yeah, it really does give you a really interesting explanation, a visual explanation of all the ages and so forth, and the things that grew and thrived and died during each of those periods of time. Baba tells us that when Pran and Akash clash, aka the Big Bang, the Om point opens and creation begins with a subtle gas that will evolve into 276 forms before the first gross world gas, ether, emerges. And we have that, I kind of have that illustrated here. I used I used the divine theme chart from God Speaks. And you've got Pran and Akash here, and you've got the Om point in the middle, and out of which comes the nebulae, and water, and protons, and neutrons, and atoms, and the ether, and those 76 forms of gas that we'll never understand. He told us that the ether evolves into major forms, which include hydrogen, helium, lithium, oxygen, iron, zinc, silver, tin, platinum, gold, mercury, radium, and uranium. Now, I don't know what the significance is of why those are the ones that he named, because there are a total of 118 elements in the periodic table, and these are kind of spread out through it, and so maybe they represent different kinds of elements that are listed in the table, because they are broken up into categories. Science tells us that 4.6 billion years ago, a molten ball coalesces from cosmic dust and debris. Heavy metals from the dust and debris sink to form a core made of nickel and iron. So here we've got nickel and iron pretty much evolving immediately. The first billion years or so are filled with the rumble of volcanic eruptions, and I have a volcano here that would smoke if I was able to put a lit candle inside of it, but I am afraid to do that. And for the next several billion years, it was all about volcanoes. That was the only sound. And was there even a sound if there was no one there to hear it? You know, that's something else to think about. A toxic yellow atmosphere forms made up of methane, ammonia, water vapor, and CO2, which makes you want to gag just to think about trying to breathe it in. The volcanic lava is cooled by the water that for now makes up 90% of the planet's surface, forming hard black basalt stone. And I'll pass these things around so that you all can see them. They are courtesy of Chris Barker, who is a geologist and who spent a lot of time with me helping me understand some of the more complex concepts in geological explanations of evolution. And he left me with fossils and other really cool things that I'll pass around as we get to them. So we have basalt, and thus are born stone and metal, Baba's first in two kingdoms. Horizontal or recumbent in form, their element is earth. In God Speaks, he calls them inorganic and solid, in which life and energy are dormant. But Baba also tells us, quote, "When I break my silence, my presence will flood the world, and even stone will feel my love." There's a wonderful quote from Erich that I wasn't able to find. It's buried in an interview or article that I edited for Nosh in this editing project that I worked on. And I edited, like 300 articles, and I could not find it. But he talks about love amongst the minerals, which I just thought was the most... Is this going in and out?
It's because you're too close to it.
Okay.
You don't have to.
First it was too far away, and now I hold it too close. Okay, I'm sorry. He talked about love amongst the minerals, and I just loved that phrase because he talked about magnetism being a force of love, gravity, all of the basic things, basic laws of the universe are really very early forms of love. And I think we forget that. And it's a really interesting way to look at it. The rocks continue to form from minerals that make up a crust that thickens on the surface, and they will make up 90% of the stones that we even see today. This part of the Precambrian eon is rightly called the Hadean or hell-like period because it was nothing but toxic gas and volcanoes for all that time. And so we come to the birth of the vegetable or plant kingdom. Somebody has a tree. Who has a tree? You want to come up here and put it here with the plant kingdom? Are you okay? Okay. And we'll put it right here. We'll put it here. The things that Baba specifically named, we're going to put in the middle, and then all of the other things are going to go around the outside. This is Baba's third kingdom, whose element is also earth. Plants are upright, and it's here that Baba introduces the first of 5 turns that represent the movement from the latent stone form to the fully realized human form. It unfolds on plants as an upside-down human whose hairs form the roots of the plant and whose torso makes the trunk, and then the arms and legs form the branches. So it's really the opposite of a human form. He said that the vegetable kingdom is half animate and half inanimate because unlike stone and metal, plants grow and change, and they require the earth because to hold them up straight.
Just further away.
Further away? Okay. Does this still work? Okay. Okay, good. I'm sorry. He said that unlike stone and metal, plants grow and change, and they require the earth beneath them to hold them upright. But they are still immobile, rooted to one spot. And this is what that prehistoric sky looked like, if you can just imagine. Whoops. So, Baba told us that evolution of form, that is life, begins with the oceans. But what was it that precipitated that extraordinary leap from inert stone and metal to living organisms? Baba called it Banchua, the first spark, precipitating a series of infinitesimal light flashes of Chaitanya, which is the origin of life. Would anybody like to read these definitions to us? Go ahead. There, I'll come back.
Banchua, from Sanskrit, derived from Ban, or wakeful consciousness. It is the first manifestation of gross life from the subtle. And that is from How It All Happened, Early Messages to the West, page 147. Chaitanya, which is also from Sanskrit, is awareness, consciousness, spirit, life, intelligence, vitality, sensation, derived from Chit, which is divine awareness, which is from Infinite Intelligence, pages 697 and 479.
Okay, thank you. And now we're ready for reading number 4. I should have just stayed over here. Who has number 4? I'm going to pass that back to Sandy. Thank you.
The last vegetable forms contain finite, Chaitanya, finite consciousness and energy. They also contain life sparks, which are themselves made up of Chaitanya, energy, and the gross essence of vegetables. These life sparks are so minute in their form that they are visible to only
Oops, sorry, typo.
Yeah, to only
Sorry.
the eye of spiritual insight. If millions and millions of these sparks mustered together, they would hardly form 1 millionth of the
On the head.
point. There are typos here.
Yeah.
If thousands of such millionth parts combined, they would collectively constitute the very first form of gross life, which is called Banchua.
Banchua.
Banchua has special importance as the first manifestation of gross life from the subtle. Nonetheless, even though it has emerged into the gross sphere, Banchua is hardly perceptible through scientific instruments. This is from the early messages to the West.
Can you pass that back up to me? Thank you. The gross world sparks, the idea of gross world electrical sparks, bring to mind electrical energy, which is everywhere on the planet. Do plants possess electrical energy? Indeed, they do. Science tells us that they can generate from a single leaf more than 150 volts of current, enough to simultaneously power 100 LED light bulbs. And our own hearts and brains, of course, we know that we also generate electrical energy. Baba tells us, science asserts that consciousness is the product of electrical energy in the brain. Baba tells us that the electrical energy produced by the brain is sparked by Banchua, which creates Chaitanya, or consciousness. So they're diametrically opposed explanations. And now we want to look at some of the terms that Baba applied to the forms within each kingdom, in this case the plants. Some of it's pretty dense and, dare I say, esoteric, but we need to lay a firm foundation before we move on to the last 4 kingdoms, which will then go a lot more quickly. Baba named what he called the firstmost and lastmost species in many of the kingdoms. And what's coming up in reading number 5 is a clear explanation of how everything in creation first passes through the subtle world before it emerges and manifests in the gross world. So who has that next reading, reading number 5?
Back when the water in the seas was still warm, it gave rise to the first vegetative form, which resembled the soft green slippery seaweed that is called leal in the vernacular. This leal-like substance was produced through the combined action of water with its varied properties, the warm temperatures that still prevailed then, and wind blowing across the water's surface. Pervading throughout the vast volumes of water, this leal is imperceptible to the ordinary human eye or gross instrument, but can be discerned by the spiritual eye only. After this first vegetative form, there followed seaweeds proper. It happened like this. The original primary greeny substance continues to spread and extend itself from the surface of the ocean right down to the seabed. Coming into contact with the bottom of the sea with its terrestrial properties through a natural process, it acquired the provision of growth. Seaweeds are the result. The vegetable kingdom begins from the time when seaweeds came into existence. And that's from How It All Happened.
Thank you. The forms that succeed leal are seaweed, as we've heard, mushrooms, now this is according to Baba, mushrooms, which science calls a fungus, neither plant nor animal. And then there's grass, the neem tree, and his favorite vegetable, which was... No, spinach. Spinach. No eggplant to be seen. It's in there somewhere. We know it is, but he didn't care to mention it. He names algae plants as the seventh or last most vegetable form. Nobody knows what algae plants are. Ward couldn't figure it out, so we'll just have to imagine.
How do you spell that?
ALVI. Yeah, and I it's not on the internet. You know, I did all kinds of searches and I couldn't find any other reference to it, so we don't know what it was.
Do you think it might have been algae?
No, that would have been the leal. The leal would have been algae. It's too far advanced. It would have to be more advanced than trees and, you know, the things that came before it. So it's something more advanced, but we just don't know what.
Yeah, maybe it's still coming.
Yeah, there you go.
Bottom of the sea that we haven't discovered.
Baba mentioned the banyan tree as the last plant form when he was lecturing the boys, and that isn't from an article that's printed in Meher Message, but that contradicts all the other times that he said that it was the alvi plant. In his dictations, okay, this was Leal, and I apologize for not remembering to bring that up. Here we go. In his dictations to the men, Baba describes turnings in the evolution of each kingdom, not to be confused with the 5 turns that he talks about in the transformation of form to the human form. So just keep that in mind. Baba tells the men, during the process of evolution of forms and consciousness, there are 7 turnings as the human form develops. Now, every turning, and here he says turn. I added the ing so it wouldn't be confusing. Now, every turning has a direct connection with God. For instance, in the vegetable kingdom, Tulsi, the holy basil plant, is on the turning. The 10 states of God in God Speaks adds yet another concept, that of seats, to our understanding of turnings. The word seat has a special seat in spirituality. And Lord Meher asks in this lovely quote, what place is there in which to welcome the one who is infinite existence? And what can serve as a seat for him who contains within himself all existence? Reading number 6.
God Speaks tells us, there are certain species of stone, metal, plant, and animal that have what Meher Baba described as a special seat in evolution. These key species of forms are mostly those that are milestones on the evolutionary road, and they mark the first and last of a certain general class of species of forms. For example, the first species of bird form to follow the last species of fish form, and the first species of animal form to follow the last species of the bird form, have a special seat significant in evolution. And that's from God Speaks, pages 484 to 484.
45, sorry.
Oh. Beams from Meher Baba on the spiritual panorama further explains the significance of seats. An interesting fact which needs mention is that at the transition from one species to another species, there is for every such transition a subspecies of a form which is double-faced. It can, as it were, not only look in two opposite directions, but move in two opposite directions. With equal facility, it can retain its contact, both with the species from which it is disengaging and with the new species into which it is becoming molded. This intermediate form has to be able to move backwards and forwards. It is absolutely necessary for transitions from one species into another.
It's pretty heady stuff, isn't it?
Is there an example?
Yeah, that's what I want.
Well, I'm going to get to that. Kangaroo is one. Actually, he didn't name the kangaroo as that, but he obviously is in that special place. In Creation and Its Causes, Ward, well, you want some examples. Well, one of the seats that he named was the turkey. It was a seat in the birds. He named the dog as a special seat in animals, which I have trouble understanding because a dog comes before primates. And Baba names the primates as the last major form in the category of animals. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in a minute. That maybe will make it maybe make it clearer and maybe not, because it's very confusing. In Creation and Its Causes, Ward introduces another new vocabulary word to us. Quote, in the communities associated with Meher Baba, in the Arabic world, the word barzak has been applied to these transitional species. A barzak in Arabic is a hindrance or a barrier, but in the writings of the great Sufi perfect master Ibn Arabi, a barzak is an intermediary like an isthmus, which both holds two bodies of water apart and brings them into association with each other. There is no evidence that Baba himself ever used this word, yet if understood in the application intended, it does seem to offer a very good name for the transitional species. In a footnote to this passage, Ward adds, reviewing Meher Baba's evolutionary account, Ivy Deuce discusses the role of barzaks as links in the evolutionary sequence in her book, What Am I Doing Here? It's a great title. She named dates as the barzak between the vegetable and animal kingdom, and I'm really having trouble wrapping my head around that kind of evolutionary leap. But she did mention another one, which we'll hear in a little bit. So let's come back to Tulsi, which means the incomparable one in Sanskrit. Baba explained, quote, that is why the rishis who knew things but could not reveal them to the world established worship of the last form of each chief form, such as the tulsi plant for vegetable. The last form of each chief form, we need to think about that for a minute. What does Baba mean by that? He calls the 7 major forms within each kingdom major species. And in the case of vegetables, we see that he named leal, seaweed, mushrooms, grass, neem trees, spinach, and alvi as the main species. So where does that leave Tulsi? Within each of these major species are all the subspecies that were too numerous for him to mention. As Baba tells the boys, quote, the names of all these species, if actually counted up, would run to 84 lakhs or 8,400,000. That's 12,200,000 species per kingdom. So when he calls Tulsi the last form in the vegetable kingdom, I think he means that it's the last form of its chief form, that it is a subspecies under the last most form of alvi plants. Does that make sense? No, I know. It didn't make sense to me either. Okay, so you've got evolution here, and you've got the kingdoms, all right? And we're in the vegetable kingdom. And in the vegetable kingdom, he names 7 major forms. And they seem to be in the order in which they evolved from simple to most complex. So you've got leal, seaweed, grass, trees. I'm going to leave one of them out, I know. And alvi plants. I've forgotten one. Spinach. Yeah, spinach and alvi plants. Let's not forget the spinach. So you've got these 7 main species, okay? And underneath of each of those are millions of other subspecies that evolved from them. In other words, underneath of spinach, there are a bazillion types of greens, I guess, that evolved after spinach evolved, and all the different kinds of grasses. And so I think what he's saying is that even though alvi plants are the last most vegetable form, Tulsi is really the last most vegetable form underneath of alvi before the transition is made to the next kingdom. Does that help?
So would Tulsi be the most evolved of all the vegetables?
Apparently.
Very sacred.
But again, we're talking about the subtle world and the difference between that and the gross world, where we think, oh, a tree has to be more evolved than any other plant form, but in the subtle world, that's not the case.
Well, maybe the last forms are the medicinal ones. Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. And Tulsi does have a lot of medicinal uses in Ayurvedic medicine. So we've heard about turnings and seats and barzaks. Are they 3 explanations of the same thing? What do you think? Because I don't know for sure. I think that they're sort of the same, but they don't always work out that way in the way things are manifested in this world. And so that's what makes it so confusing for us.
I just take it in as Baba speaks. I don't try to think it.
Yeah.
Baba speaks.
Yeah, there you go. In any case, Baba concluded, quote, consciousness here reached that stage where life and its movements have begun. And now that we've looked at the terminology and what we think he means, we can move much more quickly through the vegetables and on to the last 4 kingdoms. Science tells us that at around 2 to 2.5 billion years ago, life explodes. The first complex underwater plants evolved. Hang on. If they will stand up, they kind of have to lean on each other. There we go. The first complex underwater plants are sprouting up in the sea, as well as the first freshwater microcellular plants in the form of algae or leal, we would assume. And algae is the LUCA for all species of plants that evolve on dry land. The acronym LUCA means Last Universal Known Ancestor. and you're going to hear it coming up quite a bit. Baba explains how seaweeds gradually transform into land vegetation. The ebb and tide of the oceans was responsible for transferring the original leal onto land. When the waters of the sea receded during the hours of ebb tide, the leal left ashore was laid bare and exposed to the sun. It took root on the land, developing into the first land-based plants resembling primal mushrooms. Thus, from the original leal grew seaweeds, and from those seaweeds there sprang into being a vegetable kingdom such as we have at present. I think, we all know about photosynthesis. It's the process by which plants use sunlight to synthesize nourishment from carbon dioxide and water, and that's what it creates the green pigment chlorophyll that you see in just about all plants. And the oxygen that's generated, that's released by the process of photosynthesis is what will support life for all breathing creatures. And it turns the sky from that bilious yellow or orange to blue, to the sky that we're used to seeing now. In the past, botanists have told us that first came fungi, mushrooms, and lichens, and I have a little lichen here somewhere. I have it somewhere. But lichens are classified scientifically as neither plant nor animal. So that's another little difference there that we can identify. But they're very important because their filaments break down rocks into soil to support what was long thought to be the first microplant, moss, which you can see in this little pot.
So is that a turning or a seed?
It's.
Does it need a plant nor animal?
I don't know. I couldn't answer that. Okay. I wouldn't deign to answer that. But it does sound like it. It does definitely sound like it. As lignin forms in cell walls, the first vascular plants begin to grow upright, including the ferns, which you can also see there. Lignin is a complex oxygen-containing organic polymer, what a mouthful, that with cellulose is the chief material in wood. It is second to cellulose as the most abundant organic material on Earth. I found that fact just mind-boggling. Cellulose and lignin are the most abundant organic materials on Earth. At the same time, microscopic single-cell bacteria have begun to grow in the saltwater. They reproduce asexually by splitting, so there are no successful mutations, and enter the critters. Larger microscopic single-cell organisms evolve inside a membrane, and sexual reproduction begins. And the combined DNA from two adults allows the variability. And that's where we really see evolution taking off. We see the first possibility for successful mutations. I have a fern fossil and another plant fossil that I'm going to pass around. These belong to Chris Barker. And he was kind enough to let us look at them. It's at this time that the first trace fossils begin to form. Trace fossils means that they're the very first fossils, and they're made of soft-celled organisms, either plants or animals, that would usually decompose before they could form an actual fossil. So to have fossils of those things, those very early organisms, is really special. So these are very, very old fossils.
You know, Susan, it's kind of interesting. Fungi, now this has become a real big issue. And National Geographic just came out with interesting of how not only it's so primordial, but how effective it can be in terms of the environment and its role in that.
Interesting.
I'll send that article to you.
Yeah. I don't know if it's because I've been attuned to this topic, but I've run across so many interesting articles about every day something new is being discovered, a new species is being discovered, or we're finding something that's 14 million years older than the thing that we thought was the oldest of that category. It's just, it happens all the time, and it's kind of exciting because it just adds to the complex and dynamic nature of evolution, which is the thing that I am so fascinated with about it. Here we leave the Precambrian eon and enter into the Paleozoic. The Precambrian eon began here, and think of it as the top of the circle. And if this were all laid out properly on a real time scale, the Precambrian era would go all the way around to here, and we'd have about this much space left for the last 2 billion years of evolution, including us. I mean, we'd not even be a pinhead in that part of evolution, but there was no way that I could demonstrate that. And so I divided up the eras and so forth actually by kingdoms, so that we have room to discuss and look at each one.
What was the name of that all-encompassing?
Precambrian. And we are now entering the Paleozoic, which began very specifically 53.8 million years ago. About 4 billion years have passed, and 87% of Earth's history has already occurred. We're seeing the birth of the Worm Kingdom, in which Baba also included insects, amphibians, reptiles, and small mammals. That's the one I always forget. The element associated with the fourth kingdom, of course, is Earth. Its first form is so absolutely green, so similar to vegetation that one can hardly distinguish it from grass. That's how Baba described it to the boys. Here, consciousness experiences its first voluntary movement, undulating along, first in the water and then on the ground as it crawls up out of the water onto the dry earth. But these undersea creatures seem to belong here. And this is the first animal, if you can believe it. I'm sure he was teeny tiny, but he's really scary looking. He's got 4 eyes, and I don't know what those things are around his mouth. I don't know, they don't look like teeth. I don't think they had teeth yet. They look like, I don't know what they look like. And I wasn't sure what to do with these guys, because Baba doesn't talk about them, because I guess they're not part of the subtle explanation. But in reality, there were all these creatures that were born in the sea. And indeed, Baba did say that life began in the oceans. He just didn't explain it to us. Beginning at about 530 million years ago, sea life becomes much more diverse with more complex, free-moving ocean floor creatures. The first freshwater multicellular organisms called metazoans emerge. They include animals having the body composed of cells that are differentiated into organs and a digestive cavity with special cells. And you can see that all of a sudden, this is a leap from single and single cell things that just split in half. All of a sudden we have a leap to something that's much, much more complicated. New research places the first land animal at 425 million years ago. It was a millipede-like creature now recognized as a previously unknown species. Sorry. These are lichens. Yeah, just put them.
And it has an elliptical body, huh? Like
Yeah.
the map.
Yeah, it does. It does. I think, what we find is that I think consciousness didn't know what it was doing at the beginning. It was just learning. It was learning from itself. And these things that it created at the beginning Sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. And I think we'll see a lot more of that as we go forward. So we have this millipede creature, and it's 14 million years older than the last specimen that was officially designated the oldest bug to walk the earth. Now that's a real scientific designation for you. Small, soft-bodied creatures resembling jellyfish and sea pens evolve, and meanwhile, anemones become the first shallow ocean apex predators to prey on the jellyfish, which adapt to break loose and swim from the shallows into the open sea where there aren't any predators. So already we can see the interaction between plants and animals that are driving evolution. Excuse me. Apex predators are what we might call the top of the food chain. They will evolve into the strange, fascinating creatures that we see today, communities of complex, multicellular organisms that will eventually exist on land. But you probably want to beware of the trilobites. Here. Drop something. The arthropods are the first creatures to have external skeletons, which are articulated shells that give them both mobility and protection. And when you see the fossils, you can actually see their bodies. You can see how they were, each of their legs had its own little bit of shell, so they could move independently, but also in unison in order for them to move. They were blind, but they had a great capacity for movement. And they're the next apex predators. And they are the LUCA for 80% of animal species, including crabs, spiders, and insects. I don't know why they made that designation, but think about it. 80% of the species evolved from this little thing that you see there embedded in the rock.
Trilobites we're talking about? Yeah.
Trilobites. And this is what they looked like, and it's very easy to determine what they look like because of the proliferation of fossils. The next fossil example is, actually I don't have the fossil here, but the next sea creature to evolve in tropical waters were the cephalopods. And they are obviously the ancestors of things like octopus and squid, cuttlefish and the nautiluses. And they are mollusks. In other words, they're animals with shells. And I have a few of them here. I have a little trilobite. And I have some of these. You see the spiral in this? That's a cephalopod. And I'm not sure whether this one is winding up or unwinding, but these were the precursors to so many other animals. They are the mollusks, or animals that have shells. And just when nature, aka consciousness or infinite intelligence, is making such amazing strides, along comes the planet being struck with the first of what will be 5 mass extinctions. The first mass extinction begins at around 445 million years ago. Increasing winds lead to climate cooling until 50% of the Earth is covered in ice, leading to a drop in sea levels. About 80% of sea life is extinguished, but below 600 meters there is temperature stability, and these are the deep water survivors that we see coming out in the next stage. And the only light in the oceans was the bioluminescent plankton, because the sunlight wasn't penetrating the water. Altogether, 85% of life was extinguished. The freezing of much of planet Earth is followed by what's called the Great Melt, as some deep sea life returns to the shallows. Here we have the birth of the fish kingdom, and I have some examples of very early fish, which are very strange looking. They have kind of like dinosaur mouths and very weird fins. And actually, do you want me to pass them around?
Sure.
Okay, pass them around and take a close look. There, you can take the trilobite too. This is the birth of the fish kingdom at the end of the Great Melt, when there's finally enough water for the fish to evolve in. Baba tells us that fish experience the world in the element of water, shifting from facing up to facing down, which is the third turn. Its fins are the equivalent of the human form's hands and feet. He never mentions a firstmost form. Evolution becomes ever more complex, though, with plants, fishes, and primitive animals on the land and in the sea, all competing and interacting with one another. The very first fish, Arundospus, swims into this increasingly crowded scene. Arundospus have a square, open mouth, but no jaw, and a tail, but no fins. He was basically like a torpedo. And he could shoot through the water at 35 to 40 miles an hour. But he couldn't swallow, and he couldn't bite. So he would just swim up with his big mouth open. He would swim into his prey, that would just swim into his gut, just like that. And there's this wonderful fossil. I forgot to make a copy of it, but it's called Fish in a Fish, and it's from Kansas, and it shows an Arundopsis fossil, and he's the big fish, kind of like this, and inside Arundopsis is a perfect fossil of a smaller fish swimming in the opposite direction. And normally that fish would have been digested, but what the scientists think is that the fish was so big that it probably thrashed around and damaged Arundopsis's internal organs so that he died really quickly. He died before it could be ingested or digested, and so when he became fossilized, you get the fossils of both fish, which is really, it's fun, really fun to look at. The shark dynasty began to arrive at about 400 million years, and hang on. No, I have a big giant fish. I don't know where he swam off to. That's him. His name is Dunkeliosis, and he looks like he was made by Dr. Frankenstein. I'll pass him around, but he's got like all these patches on him. And this is what I mean by evolution just really making it up as it went. He's got these huge, weird-shaped teeth that chomp down together, and he has a working jaw, so he has a lot more capacity to eat other prey than Arundopsis had. Dunkeliosteus, and he's the Luca for all sharks. And you can kind of see why. He had sharper senses, bigger size and strength, and jaws to crush the cephalopod shells. Up until then, these guys were, another apex predator in the sea. But as soon as this fish came along, he could crush them and eat them. So, they went down a few steps in the food chain at that point. And these fish are the true survivors of the first mass extinction. Although today the orcas are kind of giving them a run for their money. I think we're seeing some very interesting evolutionary changes taking place in the behavior of the orcas. By 360 million years ago, Earth is hit by a second mass extinction. Beginning in 365 million years, there is a surge in nutrients originating in the land that's nourished by what is called the greening of planet Earth. In other words, there were so many plants that the barren volcanic wasteland was replaced by the plants, which paved the way for land animals. Photosynthesis created 60% more oxygen in the atmosphere than what we have today. But plankton rotting in the shallows created a sludge that cuts off oxygen to the water, suffocating 80% of undersea creatures. At the same time, there is increasing movement from water to land, and the blind arthropods crawl onto the dry earth. They will grow to over 3 feet long. I think he's being passed around there. As life in the sea recovers, many fish start moving back to the shallows to escape the sharks and other large predators. And the first fish who moves out of the water is this. Its lobe fins and primitive lungs allow it to crawl on the land and breathe. Its fins act as legs that can support its body weight, and it's called the tetalak. And it's considered to be the transitional species between fishes and the first four-legged animals.
What's it called?
Turtles? Somebody out here has a turtle?
Yeah, right here.
Thank you.
You want the shark in first?
Yes, I do, thank you. Yeah, he goes here and he goes there. Yes, thank you. Imagine this thing at 3 feet long. I don't know how many of you watched Life on Our Planet, but they bring these creatures to life using computers. And it kind of undulated up and over bumps and rocks and things, and it made this clicking sound where all the bits of his articulated shell were touching each other as he moved. It's a very scary looking thing.
Susan, the movie brought up, I haven't seen it all, but a couple episodes, they kept bringing up adaptation.
Adaptation is when a mutation happens that is successful, that allows, something happens in the environment usually that inspires a plant or animal to change its behavior in order to survive. And when that change in behavior is passed on to subsequent generations, then they carry it with them, and those are adaptations because they're adapting to what's happening around them.
Is that change in behavior or change in?
Physical structure, both. And there's some adaptations that, of course, don't get passed on. It looks like it's almost 3:30, and I still have a long way to go. We're not going to be able to finish today for sure, but we'll go on for a little bit longer. The turtles and alligators and crocodiles appear around 312 million years ago. Baba tells us that the last worm form is the frog. Somebody out there have a frog?
I do.
Pass him up here.
Two of them. The last one.
Well, we forget that they evolved from worms to much more complex creatures. It's a very weird kingdom because it encompasses so much evolution, from where it starts to where it winds up.
It's a weird form because it starts as a tadpole and becomes a frog.
Exactly, yeah. And it lives on the ground and in the water, lays its eggs in the water. But it's definitely a Barzak. It's definitely a transitional species to the movement from water to land and back into the water. This is called the age of amphibians. And new creatures start to emerge from the swamps, like newts and toads, frogs and salamanders. Their strong legs and their better lungs allow them to move about on dry land. And in another evolutionary leap, one species of amphibian begins to produce hard-shelled eggs in amniotic fluid that can be laid on land. So that's a major evolutionary leap. And it's the LUCA for all the amniotes, which are all species of reptiles, birds, and mammals, which are descended from this particular adaptation. Dragonflies. Who has a dragonfly? Would bring it up. Dragonflies are the first winged insect to emerge. And it blew my mind when I read this because this is a very complicated insect. Now, there had already been insects crawling around. I think the first one was something like a...
Cockroach?
No, a silverfish. Cockroach is probably at the last-most form of silverfish. But, I mean, it's got 4 wings, 6 legs, and it's got wraparound vision, which is something that's never been seen before, which allows it to see predators coming up around it, and then it can take off and fly away and not be caught.
But it also starts its life in the water.
Exactly. You're right. You're right. It does. I forgot about that.
Does it come from an egg?
They lay their eggs in the water, like amphibians. Sorry. Pardon?
And mosquitoes.
And mosquitoes. Yes, indeed. You ask yourself, why did he have to make mosquitoes and spiders? I mean, not all spiders, but like poisonous spiders, you know?
Food for somebody.
It's at this time that, well, here we go. We have some nice little frogs here. Oh, why does it say that? And the dragonfly, this wonderful photograph of a dragonfly on the water. How many of you have heard of Pangaea? Yeah, Pangaea is a supercontinent that formed from a lot of smaller continents or land masses that had been just kind of floating around. And we used to call it continental drift as they moved and shifted in the ocean, but now it's called tectonic plate movement. And what it basically meant was that underneath the sea that there was movement of plates that were not connected to one another, and they would shift and they'd run into each other, and this forced some of the land masses together until they all formed this supercontinent called Pangaea. And evidence for this is found in the matching geological formation and distribution of fossils from one area from one modern continent to another. The Appalachians are connected with the Caledonites in the British Isles, Greenland, and Scandinavia. And they began to form in the Precambrian era over 1 billion years ago. So our mountains are very old. They're the oldest mountains in the world. And they were created when 2 floating land masses collided and created elevations that were comparable to the Alps and the Rockies, but over that all that time, that 1 billion years, they've been worn down to what we see now. At 252 million years, another about 100 million years since the previous one, Earth enters its 3rd mass extinction that was brought on by 100,000 years of volcanic eruptions. We'll just put a volcano there. It's the largest and most violent ever release of noxious gases, steam, and water, and it produces acid rain that poisons the air and oceans and just about kills everything. It kills nearly all plants and animals above ground. The loss of roots causes erosion and flooding, which is accompanied by fire and storms and tornadoes and tidal waves, precipitating a 96% extinction. Earth is barren and again silent, except for the sound of the volcanoes, and the only life that's left is evolving underground. But the lava cools to form a new crust, and Sorry, something's not where I thought it should be. It forms a new crust as deep as almost 2 miles in places. And the temperatures soar, which cause sandstorms and form a desert plateau in Chile. Here we go. This is called the Hand of the Desert in the Atacama Desert in Chile, and it's a wind-produced sculpture, and it's really extraordinary. And this desert is thought to be the oldest one on Earth, and it was definitely there, either created or expanded during the third mass extinction. All plant life has been annihilated. Fungus feeding on dead organic matter are the first to return. Lystrosaurus is a small omnivore and ancestor to the mammals, and he's the first creature to emerge from caves and underground burrows, and 75% of vertebrates will descend from this very strange-looking creature. One of the things that's so interesting, at the beginning, the animals are just, they have no aesthetic appearance at all. Everything is about function, except that his saber teeth don't work. And they're just kind of, especially the mammals, they're just kind of brown and lumpy. You know, they don't look anything like the streamlined animals that we see today.
They probably look good to each other.
Oh, I'm sure they did. Tasty. They looked real tasty. Also, the lizards and small reptiles survived because they were cold-blooded, and that allowed them to thrive in the heat. There's no rain, only salt water seeping up from the ground, which nobody can drink until the brine flies that drink the water desalinate it, and then the lizards can feed on those. The age of reptiles is now in swing. It's about 248 million years ago, as the precursors of the dinosaurs grew larger and more predatory. On land, the tortoises are flourishing. We'll go back to those. I learned that we don't have turtles on the land, even though we talk about box turtles and so forth. They're really tortoises, and the turtles live in the water. And one of the tortoises, or several of the tortoises, went back into the water at some point and became the sea turtles that we love and try to protect so much now. And Baba named turtle as the last form in the vegetable kingdom, and in the worm kingdom. Sorry.
So, like the turtles, like a snapper lives in the pond,
Mm-hmm.
it comes out of the pond.
Mm-hmm.
You call that a tortoise?
As a turtle.
I think it's a turtle, but
What we call the box turtles are really tortoises.
yeah,
The turtles are higher than like alligators.
yes. According to Baba, they are. Do you all want to take a little bit of a break? It's 3:30 and we really don't have that much more time, and I'm never going to get through all of this. So we're going to have to rethink and I think have another meeting because there's just not enough time. I'll just go on a little bit more since it's getting so late. At 234 million years, there came something called the Long Rain. It was a period of global warming. Excessive heat from more volcanic eruptions caused incessant rainfall that led to cataclysmic floods. For 1 to 2 million years, the planet Earth knows nothing but rain, and during a 31 million year recovery, the water begins to form a megadelta surrounded by nutrient-rich soil to create a new world for the plants to come back. But at 201 million years, the world is again rocked by the fourth mass extinction. Now, it's hard for us to imagine the lengths of time between these extinctions. 100 million years has passed since the last one. And so, what can be reduced to 2 paragraphs on a piece of paper, it's really a huge expanse of time that we can just barely take in when we think about it. There are 2 theories as to the cause, either more volcanoes or possibly the impact from a comet or asteroid. So geologists disagree about that. And this extinction resulted in 80% loss of life, including all the large primitive mammals, to make way for the dinosaurs. During the recovery, the first life to emerge are insects, protected by their burrows or cocoons or armored bodies, and only scavengers survive in the ocean: sharks, arthropods, crabs, and the bottom feeders, because they're protected by the deep water. One of the questions that comes back to me again and again is, what happens after an extinction? What does it mean to say that there's a 30 million year recovery? Does life have to go back to its very beginnings? Do the earliest creatures have to be recreated, or do they appear in their more modern form? Which that doesn't make any sense. I read and I couldn't find any explanation for what that process is really like. When you think about it, it's mind-boggling when 80%, 90% of life is swept off the board, and you have to start over from scratch with the species that died out.
My guess is that it isn't from scratch, because I don't know the words here, but whatever is in what survives is more dense than what it came from.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then it goes on and advances again. There may be another cataclysmic thing, but there has been progress.
There is definitely progress. I think I began to think of all these extinctions as mini pralayas. We talk about the Mahapralaya when God takes the universe back into himself. But to me, these are mini pralayas because they extinguish so much life, plants and animals. And, Baba has said that nothing happens without his knowledge, right? Nothing happens without his knowledge. And even if you put it down to Maya, that's still doing his work. Fred?
Yeah, it makes sense to me that after each of the extinctions, that the environment is completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
So the species that are left over have to adapt to a whole new environment.
Sure.
Therefore, creating whole new forms.
Sure.
I mean, they did bring that up in the
Yes,
movie
they did.
over and over again.
Yeah.
That survive seemed to, adaptation was key.
Yes. The strongest, and this is where survival of the fittest kind of comes into play. You can see how evolutionary scientists came up with that phrase, because that is true at the end of each extinction. But it's not the physical fitness. Well, the physical fitness is a function of the consciousness of the creature. So it's really the consciousness, the survival of the fittest consciousness that drives the creation of the new animals and plants in the next era.
But wouldn't it also be that the form has to follow the evolution of the consciousness?
Yes.
So that therefore each time
Uh-huh.
the evolution follows one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if consciousness is a steady, unbroken stream, we know the soul never changes. The soul is consciousness. I think consciousness is the thing that survives the extinctions, and it comes back smarter each time. It comes back smarter. But I also wonder if the extinctions didn't have a purpose, and that purpose was to get out of the way the creatures that were not meant to survive, and the ones that consciousness was most prevalent in were the ones that were supposed to carry on. So I don't know. It's a very complex kind of process to think about.
Susan?
Uh-huh.
On all these extinctions, it's never that all
No.
There's always a few that survive.
Right.
Or something, yeah.
Right, but it depends on what kind of extinction it is. Sometimes it's only, well, like the deep sea creatures survived because they were out of the part of the water that was affected by the acid rain. Or what's the other one that I just thought about? Well, the dinosaurs, we haven't gotten to them yet, but yes, I think that's really, really true.
There were mammals that were able to live underground.
Right. It was the underground mammals that carried the rest of the mammals forward. So now we've come to the dawn of the Jurassic era. We're about 150 million years away, which is nothing compared to the length of time that has gone before us. And it's one which we are very familiar with thanks to that blockbuster film, Jurassic Park. Pangea begins to break apart, again because of tectonic plate movement. And this graphic is really interesting because it shows you exactly how the modern continents broke away and are formed. You can see the countries, you can see the continents that are formed as they break apart and begin to drift away from one another. Existing plant and animal forms are separated as these continents separate, and as they separate, then the animals on each continent begin to evolve differently, because as each continent moves, there are changes again in the environment that influence the adaptations that take place on that land. And so that's why there's so many weird animals in Australia, and so many different animals here, different animals in Europe, and so forth. It's because of that. This is a prehistoric flower. This is a flower that originated in the Jurassic era, and it is still found on Tasmania, the island of Tasmania, which is so beautiful. And they have so many prehistoric Jurassic era plants there that they have a park that's known around the world for the exotic plants that they've been able to preserve, because it was this small bit of land that broke away, and it wasn't influenced by what was happening in the land, the islands, and so forth around it.
So it's the real Jurassic Park.
It's the real Jurassic Park, yeah, minus the dinosaurs. The wind and water are spreading spores and seeds as flowering plants evolve and compete with one another to attract the pollinators. The colors become more vivid and the scents more alluring. And today there are 10 times more flowering plants than all other species combined. And for the first time, there are more plants and animals on land than in the sea. And this brings us to the age of the dinosaurs. Somebody out there has a dinosaur. Thank you. T-Rex. The dinosaurs thrived because they had more body mass and better heat regulation. They had better vision and hearing, which made them more successful predators. The females laid eggs, but at the beginning they provide no care for their young, whose first instinct is not to get stepped on by somebody bigger. But they get there's no one there for them. They hatch into this world and they're on their own completely. Later on, the females, like what was called Myosara, or good mother, begin to care for their young. They build these earthen nests where they lay their eggs, and they become very, protective of their eggs, and have a tendency to fight with the other Myosaras when they get too close to their young. They're very predatory. And the males at this time begin to exhibit teamwork and pack hunting skills, which is really scary. So this is a rendition of one of the dinosaurs. One of the wonderful things about the way these animals are recreated is the use of color, which is, scientists have no idea what colors the dinosaurs were. You know, so they have to use their imaginations. They have a skeleton, and you know, it's possible digitally to recreate skin and a body around that skeleton, and so that's how we see what we think they look like, but in reality we don't know for sure. At 9 tons and 25 feet in length, T-Rex remains the greatest apex predator that ever walked the planet, or at least until we appeared. His powerful jaws and chewing meant that he could prey on everything, including other T-Rexes. So what did one T-Rex say to the other T-Rex when he bit into his leg? "You taste just like chicken." Sorry. Sorry. I couldn't not tell you that. All the other mammal species and animal species are forced to the fringes by the dinosaurs, who just rule over everything, but their day of reckoning is coming. And this brings us to Baba's fifth kingdom, whose element is air, the bird kingdom. In God Speaks, Baba tells us the bird form enriches or enlightens consciousness with new experiences, since as a feathered vertebrate, it is capable of flying in the air and with the help of its 2 legs of maintaining an erect stand in the gross world. Birds constitute the 4th turn in the movement from latent to full human form, and they are the first warm-blooded creatures. Baba named the first forms the first form as a duck, or some kind of waterfowl. Who has a duck? There's a little ducky. Thank you. And someone has a seabird, an albatross. Here he is. I thought of the albatross for some reason as another bird that kind of connected the land and the sea. I don't know why.
What about the penguin?
And the penguin. Okay, we're going to get to the penguin. We're going to get to him. We're going to get to him, I promise. A bird called Terraclaw dionicus evolved the first feathers on enormous clawed front feet and arms, and he was absolutely terrifying, which is why he's called terror bird, but he is where all birds are descended from. At about 160 million years ago, some dinosaurs started to develop front legs, their front legs began to develop or evolve into wings. Okay, waterfowl. This is an old duck. This is a prehistoric duck. I couldn't figure out how big he was, but he looks really big, doesn't he? He looks massive. Okay, there's the terror bird. You can see why he got his name. He's absolutely horrifying. And he ate everything. And here we come to Antioornis, which is the gliding dinosaur bird. Their front legs begin to resemble wings, and they can't flap the wings. They don't have control over them, but they can extend them out and they can glide, which means that they can escape predators more easily. And so that's an adaptation for them that's an adaptation that's really important, and of course will carry on into the entire bird kingdom. Alfred Russel Wallace was fascinated with the golden bird of paradise, which grew in the jungles of Malaysia, of southeastern Asia. And there's a great quote that's kind of makes you sad. He wrote that one of his assistants arrived triumphant one afternoon with a fine specimen of the great bird of paradise. The ornamental plumes had not yet attained their full growth, but the richness of their orange coloring and the exquisite delicacy of the loosely waving feathers were unsurpassable. It goes without saying that it had been killed. And this was a really big issue with 19th century explorers, that they just couldn't anticipate. They could not anticipate that they were killing the things that they loved, because for them, everything in the world was new, and they saw a world of abundance. You know, they saw so many creatures, and it never occurred to them that eventually we would kill so many of them that they would die off. And I guess they would be horrified. I hope they would be horrified now at the process that they set into motion.
So
Birds.
That's extinct. The golden bird of paradise is extinct.
I think so. Yes, I'd have to double check it, but I think so. Birds everywhere continued to diversify into things like raptors and owls, with flapping wings and teeth that evolved into beaks. These mega owls were 3 feet tall. They were the first owls, and they were fearsome predators with adaptations like night vision, acute hearing, and really sharp talons. They also were able to fly higher and for longer distances. And the raptors and owls became apex predators of their time. And the flamingos will exhibit complex courtship rituals.
What kind of rituals?
Courtship rituals. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a film of them, but it's hilarious. They're standing in the water, right? And they line up in a line, and they just kind of do this, like a country and western dance, back and forth. The males, are dancing for the females. It's the funniest thing, one of the funniest things I've ever seen, right? It's just hilarious. Baba named the cock or turkey as the seat for birds. So we have a turkey here somewhere. Thank you. My father paid 5 cents for this turkey in 1950, and it's been on my Thanksgiving table every year since. It's very special, very old. Now, the thing that's interesting to me about this, you remember he said the seats were at the beginning or end of each of the kingdoms, but on Ward's illustration, the turkey's kind of in the middle. It's not near the end, so I'm not sure what that's about. I think it may be another one of the contradictions in some of the things that Baba told us. He told the boys that the very last bird is big, with long legs and a blood-red bag of flesh hanging under its chin, as if its throat were hanging down. And the boys must have just been hanging on these explanations of things that they had never seen, couldn't imagine, and knew that they would never again see. So who has a really scary-looking bird? Maybe nobody has it. Nobody has it. I thought of the cassowary, because Ward thought it might be the turkey, but he's already named turkey, shown turkey on the diagram as being in the middle of the birds. And so I don't see how a turkey could possibly be what Baba was talking about, because they also have short legs. This is a long-legged bird. It's related to ostriches and emus. And it can jump 7 feet in the air and kick you to death. I mean, it is really, it's a terrifying bird that you don't want to meet in the wild. And in the next few years, and here's a picture of it. There's its face up close.
Where do they inhabit?
They're in Africa and maybe some parts of Asia. I'd have to look to be sure, to be really sure.
In the zoo in Pune.
Yeah, there was one in the zoo in Budapest, but we didn't see it because we went at the wrong time and they were hiding in the shade, and the 8-year-old in me wanted to throw a stone or something to provoke it so it would come out, but the adult prevailed and I didn't do that. It's probably a good thing. We're entering now the Cretaceous era, which is an age of biodiversity, 79 million years during this phase of life. You can see Darwin's collection here. I have a couple of leaves that I wanted to share. This is a not a Bodhi leaf, but a banyan tree leaf from Marizod. I have a whole collection of those. And this is a magnolia leaf that I picked up on the center during my first visit, and it looks like it's bronzed. It's so beautiful and perfect. But magnolias came along a lot later, but not until they came along before the bees, because they were pollinated by beetles. And then the bees came along and became more successful pollinators. We probably really need to stop now. It's almost 4 o'clock, and I don't know. What do we want to do? Do we want to have another meeting for the rest of it?
How much more do you have?
A bunch.
30 minutes?
Probably more, because we're only maybe about halfway around. The story gets more complex as time goes by. And you hear me jumping back and forth between the plant kingdom and the bird kingdom and the dinosaurs and so forth. And that's because that's how evolution happened in the real world. Everything, when you look at Baba's explanation, you think, oh, okay, all the rocks evolved, and then, there came worms or vegetation. And after all the vegetation evolved, there came the worms. But it's all happening at the same time, but that's one of the things that mechanisms that drives it. The interactions of creatures, and some are food, some are predators, some are prey, some plants are edible, some are not, useful or not useful to the animals. And so it becomes very entangled. The kingdoms that Baba talks about become completely entangled and dependent on one another. And
what about the possibility of integrating it in the next one? Is there any way you could do that?
integrate what?
What we have left to do.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, and also add another program at the very end.
yeah.
And just
There we go. Keep the same dates. That's probably the best thing to do.
We have 2 more times.
Can you schedule another one 4 weeks after the last one? Try. Can you try to do that? Do you want me to call and give you a nudge to do it?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that. As you can see, there's still so much stuff to share, and it's too complicated to rush through. It's a story that I want to do justice. I forgot to mention this when we were talking about the undersea creatures. This is the Luca for the paperclip. It's a real creature. You can see its head. It looks like a squid, kind of, but it's like a paperclip. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And I also have dinosaur finger puppets that Chris gave me. Well, I guess that we will stop here because we're coming up to the birth of the animal kingdom, and it seems like a good stopping place. You guys are welcome to come up and look at all this stuff and see it up closer, because I know where you're sitting. You can't see what's the labels that I've put on this, but you're welcome to come up and look at them if you'd like, and we'll just pick up with part 2 whatever the next meeting is. I think it's the beginning of June, isn't it? This is the beginning of May, so it would be the beginning of June.
This is June the 2nd.
Oh, is it really? Oh my God, you're right, you're right, you're right. Oh.
Should we remember what creatures we had and what reading?
Oh, we'll put it all back.
No, we won't redo the readings. We're going to pick up where we left off.
What I said was, shall we come back and remember what we had?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We'll pass them around again. Yeah, but maybe hold on to your penguin.